Welcome back to Mental Notes with Matt. I'm especially excited about today's conversation because it brings me back to a formative time in my life. I'm joined by Kittle, director, educator, and someone who left a lasting impression on me during my time at Rutgers University's Mason Grove School of the Arts. Kevin has worked alongside theater legends like Joseph Chaikin, Arthur Miller, and Sam Shepard, and has directed numerous productions across New York City's vibrant theater scene, from the public theater to signature theater. But beyond the resume, Kevin is a thought leader in the truest sense. Someone who challenges artists to dig deeper, think harder, and show up with courage and clarity. One of the ideas that stuck with me from our time together was the notion of having a strong point of view, not just in performance, but in how we live. And that concept has echoed in my life ever since, and it felt like the perfect theme to unpack together. So, Kevin Kittle, thank you so much for joining me. Let's just dive right in. Why don't we start with this phrase, having a strong point of view? Can you share what that's meant to you and when you were teaching actors, and then maybe how it's evolved or deepened for you over the years?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's so great to see you, Matt. Um, yeah, you know, speaking specifically to acting, the point of view is all you have.
Yeah.
Uh, Assuming that other people are as trained as you. Like you know this as an actor. You might walk into the waiting room of an audition and there's 20 actors sitting there and they all essentially have your temperament maybe, or even your look. And you go, well, then what the heck separates me from them? And the answer is your personal point of view.
Yeah.
And it's a total cliche, but it can't be disputed. You are the only you on earth. And it's such a cheesy thing to say, but nobody could argue with it. So if you don't develop that point of view, and I'm speaking only to acting, but I guarantee this goes across all walks of life. You're developing yourself so that you bring to any room, whether it's a job in a corporate situation, or it could be a party, a social situation where, because you are the most you can be, then you elevate that situation there. So, knowing who you are, knowing how you feel about everything under the sun, and also having the tools to release that. Like, it's not enough to know it. If you what do they say in the Bible, right? Don't hide your light beneath a bushel. Like, what's the use of having a strong experience of something, but then you don't manifest it externally, verbally, or even physically?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, I think that I've struggled with that over the years. There's so much out there, especially in the social media world and just, media in general, of people doing the same things and feeling like, oh, I don't really have a voice that's going to be any different than these people are, tackling these different issues. And it's not true, because we all have our own unique way of sharing this information because of our own personal life experiences and what we've been around.
100%. And listen, you just shared with me that you have twin boys, twin sons, but they're different. They're individual.
They're
Right?
polar
You could go,
opposites.
well, they're twins, right? No, they're two individuals.
Right.
Even if you had a clone, dude, you couldn't. You still there's something still that clone ain't you. You're the
That's right.
original. That
That's
clone is
right.
a facsimile of you. You know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's absolutely true. And they're polar opposites too. One is big and expressive, and the other one's a lot more calm and kind of thoughtful. And they complete each other. Um,
Nobody could ever accuse them of being the same person. Oh, you too. You're just the same, right? But
right.
no.
Yeah, it's a
But
beautiful thing.
but I would imagine that they developed who they are largely because of their parents. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm sure you keep an eye on them and you see what they're organically into and you feed it.
And over time that definitely comes through a lot more strong. It's the experiences all compounding, and what they're seeing and what they're living, and they definitely exude that in their own ways, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So then, in your work as a director and teacher, what do you see in someone when they don't have a clear point of view yet? I mean, what are the signs, or how do you help them find their unique point of view?
It's a good question. I think it would be. It's not just obvious to me as a teacher or director. I think it would be almost obvious to anybody, whether you have a trained eye or not.
Mm,
You know if you're in the presence of somebody who's, I don't have a better word. This is a little mean, mushy. Like a mushy person. It's like they don't come down. They don't. I don't. They were in the room and then they left, and you go, I barely felt their presence. They might as well
right.
not have been in the room. I barely felt their presence, and it's sad. That's very sad.
Hmm.
So usually for me, it's somebody who there's a fear there. You could see there's a fear, and one of the worst things you could do is go along. Like sometimes you'll just be like, "That's okay with me." Like someone will say something, and they'll be like, "Yeah, okay, let's just go with that." You
Yeah.
go, well, I, as a teacher, I make sure that the quiet person in the room talks.
Yes.
How about you? How do you feel about that? And they'll be like, I'm fine with what everyone else says. I'm like, no, come on, say at least one thing that's on your mind. Here's another thing. We keep talking about point of view, but point of view does not necessarily mean that if you see somebody who's sort of quiet or quote unquote mushy, it doesn't necessarily mean they don't have a point of view. It just means they're sitting on it.
Absolutely.
They're sitting on it.
100% true. And I've fallen into that camp quite a bit in my adult life. I think, in those early years, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, it was a little bit easier to not feel self-conscious about that stuff, but you enter the world as an adult. And I think you shield yourself and only show certain versions to be appropriate, especially as
Well,
you're doing.
that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
That word appropriate is, obviously it's always been up. There's always been the word appropriate, but it's only recently that it's taken on a kind of meaning that's valid, but also a little insidious, I think. So
Hmm.
but that's inappropriate. I always want to hear, like, what's the definition of inappropriate?
Yeah.
Because I spoke up or spoke my truth, it's inappropriate. And we certainly do school. I think every young person has a point of view. Every 2 or 3 year old has a personal point of view. And then you start schooling them, and it becomes about like, I've said this to you before in our in our training as actors. You the rules that we have for children are about not overturning the apple cart. And anytime I was saying this just the other day. I was talking to somebody and I said to them, I'm always the person on the airplane where the seat in front of me has some little kid in it. And they always stand on the chair and turn around and they rest their chin on their back of their seat. So they're looking at me.
Right.
But then you always see an arm come up and take the kid and pull him back down. And that's a parent saying, it's not polite to stare. But I don't feel that kid is staring at me. I feel like they're taking me in. And
Absolutely.
we're communing there. And so then you're told not, but then when that kid's looking at me, I could see a million things going through their face. That is their point of view about me. But then eventually I mean, children, of course, should be socialized, but you don't want to crush them. You don't want them just walking lockstep.
For sure.
And so I will see that. It's funny that when I used to teach BFA, that's first year college, I would get 18-year-old kids. My wife used to teach first grade. And at
Hmm.
the same time, she and I would come home. She was teaching 6-year-olds and I was teaching 18-year-olds. And we would find we had some of the same.
Oh, absolutely. Especially in acting school, we get to reignite that sense of play.
Yes, that sense of play and that sense of expression.
Mhm.
This is how I respond to that thing, and to have the courage to have your own voice.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people lose that courage over time, myself included at different points in my life. It
Oh,
can
of
be tough to
course. Well,
sustain when there are
yeah.
expectations around you, for sure.
But listen, though, now look, the flip side of that is it is possible to be
Mhm.
inappropriate. We all know what we mean by that.
For
We
sure.
don't want a loose cannon. We don't want somebody that you don't know how to work, plays well with others, right? That would
Hmm.
be the six-year-old and the 18-year-old.
Right.
Do you feel the room? Can't you read the room? So we're not saying, hey, go out and be a loose cannon. That's your point of view. No, you still have to live in a society. So, what are
Got to
the
find a balance.
parameters?
Yeah. We got to find a balance, that's appropriate. But I do think that in the year 2025, we're living in a very strange modern world. And it can also be a little bit scary to take a strong stance artistically, socially, or even personally. What are the risks and rewards of developing and expressing a strong point of view as it applies today, with what we are inundated with hourly,
Well, now you
every minute.
now you're in my wheelhouse, man. Now you're in my wheelhouse because we hit a wall. I retired partly because of this from Rutgers. I
Mhm.
really didn't have to retire. I wasn't even 60, or I think I just turned 60. I had years left in me, but I looked around and I went, I'm afraid that these young people literally have a different idea about what art is than I do.
Yeah,
We are living in a time. Well, listen, this is the challenge. This is the complexity. I truly believe that the young people today, teenagers and people in their 20s, they're the most compassionate generation we've ever had. They're the most empathic generation. They really look around and see the lived experience of others.
right.
So God bless them. I'm from the 60s and 70s. We thought we were the ones out of like peace and love.
Right.
But look at it. These guys really mean it. This generation really means it. And they want to eradicate sort of bigotry and hate and all that stuff.
I agree.
But a weird thing has happened. They've spun it so that instead of allowing other people to be who they are, they crush their own like in their fear that they're going to oppress someone else, they suppress themselves
Yeah,
and they have no point of view.
right.
And listen, at its best, they are concerned that they don't want to offend anyone, right?
Mhm.
At its worst, they're afraid of being canceled on social media.
Right.
That's about, I mean, let's call it what it is. The bottom line is you could say one wrong word somehow, and you will get canceled for whatever
Sure.
that. Everything they do is scrutinized, and they live their lives online, and the whole world. It's not just their town or even their state or their country. The globe. They'll hear about you in another country. That you're the
Yeah, you go
person who
go
said
viral overnight.
viral.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I mean, so what happens here? This is what happened to me at Rutgers. I'm trying to train artists, and I'm encouraging them to have a personal point of view and to be brave and put it out there. And instead, they are so timid.
yeah. No, you're exposed to every bit of information in the world lightning fast all the time, and like you were saying, they are a really empathic, emotionally intelligent generation of people, but it's almost like they are so aware of that is it really fully authentic, or is it what they have been trained to feel like that is what you're supposed to do or how you're supposed to be, you know?
Second one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
I
the
I
second
would
one.
agree. I would
They're
agree.
absolutely trained. They are being trained and they train themselves.
Right.
And they are, I'm not going to be too specific about this or throw anybody under the bus, but back around the time just before I retired, there was so much pushback on us and the faculty and whatever. And people would come to me privately in my office and say, I just want you to know that I don't actually believe in that stuff. And I'm like, well, then what are you doing? They're like, I'm afraid of having a voice that is counter to the. So what we have, weirdly, is a brand new kind of mob mentality,
Yeah.
a new kind of lemmings running to the cliff and they just falling off in front of the lemming in front of them. It's like,
Right.
you know,
Right.
you could
Right.
you could slam on the brakes, like, no, they're all going off, so I'll go with them.
Right.
It's very, very disheartening. And like I said, it's a weird dichotomy. Like these are people who are very, very worldly, and yet they're kind of tiny.
Yeah.
They have a point of view, but they do not release it. They're
It's
afraid to.
suppressed. Yeah.
Well, our job as actors is to respond impulsively
Mhm.
from the neck down, right? There should be thinking, no thinking aloud when you're acting, right? Or let's never mind acting as an artist.
Mhm.
Artists in general and artists better not, let's say a visual artist better not dip their brush in paint and then look at the canvas and go, what should I do with it? No, man, you better go brush to paint to canvas.
Right.
And then when you're done, step back and go, what is it? You can't control your hand should not be controlling the brush. It should be the other way around. We have a whole generation of artists now who are like, they're afraid of things like appropriation. I don't want to appropriate somebody else's culture. And you go, well then, so you're just limited to what are you doing? You're limited and limiting yourself there.
You limit the nuance of
Oh,
life, what can be out there and what you can experience by kind of
no.
being in a cookie cutter. This is what it's supposed to be in order to
Yes.
appease everyone. Yeah.
It's the death of nuance. It's the death of irony.
Mm,
Like you're not allowed to say anything anymore that is not the appropriate thing to say, but the reason you're saying it that way is to make a point. But
mm,
if you say it, everybody's sincere as hell, and they all think you really mean that. So the next thing you know, everybody's just there's no if irony dies, then there's no there. So now we just walk around saying earnestly what we mean.
yeah. Yeah, I'd agree. And so what do we do then? How do we, what do you say to someone that's struggling to find their voice, their authentic voice? Whether you're an artist, a leader, or just anyone that's trying to navigate life with more authenticity, where do you even start?
Well, it begins with your value system.
Yeah.
I think we've stopped examining our value system. Right? A point of view, really, when you consider it, is your value system. And where do you get your value system? From your family, very often from your religion.
Mhm.
Uh, and if you're not literally religious, it may be a spiritual thing, or it may be or maybe you're in tune with nature or something. Like, who cares what you call it? God is
Mm,
God is God, whatever. But your personal point of view comes from your value system. What do you value? When you and I were when you were studying acting, we call it an emotional chord. Like,
mhm,
what is that chord that just gets you go? Like, I would say to anybody who wants to develop their point of view, the next time you're watching a movie, ask yourself here's a word from what we were just talking about, trigger, right? What's
mhm,
triggering you?
mm,
And then you look back and go, what was that theme? What was that chord that triggered me? Loyalty, injustice, um, abandonment, right? Well,
mhm.
you go, how come that movie? I had a guy ask me once, how come every time I watch one of those sports movies where the guy gets put down the whole movie, but then at the end he kicks the field goal that wins the game and they all carry him up? What is that? Like that's a
Yeah.
chord that speaks to, maybe it speaks to injustice, or maybe it speaks to acceptance. You get accepted for who you are. I don't know, but I would say that you have to examine your value system. What do you care about? And somebody might go, money.
Right.
I care about money. You go, well, all right. What's behind that? Money is just green paper. What do you mean, money? What's behind it?
Mm,
Security. Oh, you mean, I get it. Maybe you grew up and didn't have a lot of stuff, and now you do. Or maybe it means you could buy stuff for your mom or your dad or whatever. Okay, so it's not money, right?
mm,
You have to examine this stuff. I don't know if we did this, Matt, when you were studying with me, but I will have my students literally write a list, things I love, things I hate.
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, but it's such a generic things I love and things I hate,
Yeah,
but
but
it's a good place to start.
it's a jumping off point. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
I mean, there are
jumping off.
so many of these layers that I think a lot of people, especially now, don't even give themselves permission to go there. It's like the surface level stuff, and that's enough. I can't really, go
Oh
there.
my God. Oh, and the lists I'll get, things I love, ice cream, it's a little bit, yeah. But
Yeah,
then about 6 or 7 down on the list, they'll be like, my grandma. I go, okay. Or they'll go, my family. And I'm like, stop. Even that's kind of general.
yeah.
Who in your family? My grandma. You go, okay, you narrowed that down to, like, if I really had to think about it, my
Mhm,
grandma, things I love, things I hate. But then we'll take that list and break it down. Like, well, things you love are things that crack you up laughing, or things that
mhm,
fill you with warmth, or things that, generosity, all the things under that. And things you hate, racism or whatever, right?
yeah.
But the truth is, to continue speaking about acting, Stanislavski, right, the great person who codified a certain way of having a system of acting, he asked a great question: how many emotions are there? Right, actors get overwhelmed. There are so many emotions, infinite. No, it's not. It's about five.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
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 So this is what he said. There are 7 colors in the rainbow. Maybe, I don't know. There's really only 3 primary colors, I think. But he said there are 7 colors in the rainbow. There are 7 notes on the musical scale, right? Da 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 da. There's only 7. But out of those 7 notes, you get Mozart, but you also get Beyonce or whatever. Then he said it's the same with human emotion. There's about 5 or 7 basic human emotions. So if you identify those and you ask yourself, how do I feel about? You may go, I feel frustrated there, or I feel jealous of that, or I love, or what. But I have a friend who's a movement teacher. She said every emotion is whittled down to two. There are only two: love and fear.
Yeah.
That's it. Everything comes down to love or fear. And sometimes they could be the same thing,
Yeah.
right? Because jealousy could be, I love you so much, that it hurts me and I get jealous if I think you love someone else. But it could also be fear. I love you so much that I fear I'm not enough to hold on to you. And so which do you want it to come from, You got to sit with yourself for this kind of stuff. People don't they don't examine, they don't sit with themselves long enough to go, well, that happened. And I'm sitting here with a tree, I'm out in nature. And you don't go, huh, a tree. We take it all for granted.
Yeah, we do. We do. I mean, it's largely, I think, because of the rectangular device we have in our hands 24/7, without a doubt. It's a major
A
contributor.
hundred
Yeah.
percent.
Yeah,
Every day that I walk in New York, someone almost crashes into me.
absolutely.
Speaking of point of view, don't you want to say to them, look in the direction you want? Like, that's a point of view. You want to let them have it. But then you go, yeah, but I don't feel like getting stabbed on the subway today. So you don't say anything,
Yeah,
you know?
that's a
But
terrific point.
that damn phone, man, it also, it gives us a kind of comfort. It lets us put our attention on, when you start to feel something, you go, oh shit, I don't want to feel that. You go, I know what I'll do. I'll scroll through somebody's Instagram, whatever. And
And I
it's
think
a
we're
balm.
all guilty of that in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I see it everywhere. I do it also. You get into an uncomfortable situation, and it's awkward, and that is there. It's something that you can pretend you're doing. It's terrible. It's
And
terrible. But awareness of it, I think, is the first step. Also, trying
absolutely.
to change that behavior too.
Do you know? Yeah, it's like, I guess, any habit you try to get out of first, you feel you realize you're smoking a cigarette. You go, what am I doing? And you throw it down and stuff.
Right.
Do
Right.
you know I don't have a cell phone? Did I ever tell you that? I don't have a cell phone.
I mean, I feel like you were very low tech back when I was at Rutgers, so it doesn't surprise me.
Well, it drives
But
people crazy. They say to me, if you don't have a cell phone, how can I reach you? And I'm like, ha ha.
I'll tell you what, you responded to my email, I think, within 2, 3 hours of sending it. That's faster than most people text me back. So
Absolutely.
there's your there's your answer. That's
No, people
incredible.
say that to me. They say, you don't have a phone, but you don't text, but you answer emails faster than anybody I know,
Yeah, it's true.
because I'm
Being
aware that
present.
people are trying to reach me. They do try, I have former students like, can I talk to you about a role that I'm doing? Well, what if I answer them 2 days later? They already did the role yesterday. It's too late. So I do keep up on that.
Yeah, but that's great that you have this habit, that long-standing habit of keeping yourself in the real world, which is
Yeah.
refreshing.
Yeah. Somebody may be reaching out to you.
Right. So tell me about what you're doing now. You're no longer at Rutgers. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about
Yeah.
this
Well,
new
this is
venture.
this Matt, you're gonna go crazy when you hear this. I invented a it's not an invention, it's a extension of the technique that you and I trained in, which is the Meisner technique. And in the Meisner technique, for those of your listeners who don't know, Sanford Meisner was this acting teacher, and he, among others, know that the key to acting is listening.
Mm,
So he invented this exercise called the repetition exercise, where you say what your partner said. So, if you said to me, you're wearing a black shirt, I would say to you, I'm wearing a black shirt. The simplicity of that is, we're only saying you said you're wearing a black shirt. That is true. And then I say, I'm wearing a black shirt. That's true. I'm saying, we're both saying the truth. But then when you go further with it, you go, you're making me very upset right now, Matt. Like you start to operate from the neck down. It's not observational. It's from the heart and the gut. And you start saying things like, hey, I'm saying out loud how I feel, right?
mm,
Well, here's what happened in answer to your question. My students over the last 5 or so years couldn't do it. They would never say, Matt, you're making me mad right now. They couldn't identify how they were feeling. And if they did identify how they were feeling, they would not say it out loud.
Mm.
because they were afraid that if they spoke something impulsively, it may come out in a way that, as you said before, would go viral immediately. As if what I said to you in the present moment is who I am in my actual life and my stance or whatever. And people are afraid of being labeled like, well, that guy said a racist thing. It's like, look, can we assume goodwill? Can we assume that that person is not racist? Can we assume that they're just saying something impulsively, but somebody else goes, that's an appropriation of a blah, blah, blah. You go, but they don't mean, they don't hate an entire race of people. Can we take a step back? Well,
Right.
my students flattened out and had no point of view. So I actually invented an extension of that exercise where I have two people repeating off each other, but I added a third person that we call the God mic. And that person tells the actor what to say. So they have to say it. So if you and I are working and you're starting to piss me off, and then the God mic goes, Kevin, tell Matt he's pissing you off. So then I have to go, Matt, you're pissing. I have to say what quote unquote God told me to say. Well, what is God? It's my unconscious. My God is my voice, my capital G God voice.
Mhm.
So all of a sudden, these young kids would sit across from each other and they would say what they feel, but someone else fed to them what to say. And weirdly, they took ownership of it because they're like, I didn't say it. He told me to say it.
Right.
Permission. But once they said it, they're like, no, I really do mean this.
Yeah. Interesting how, and that person, the God, the God character is really just observing. It's a very observational role, and they are actually seeing the truth and just
Absolutely.
and then laying that truth onto those actors so that they can feel free enough to utilize what they actually feel. What's plain plain to see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't it funny though that the person who knows what's actually going on is the
Mhm.
one who's not in that exercise? Between the two people, like you and I are in contact with each other, we're the ones that aren't acknowledging what's going on. But somebody outside of it goes, I see the truth plainly. Matt is upsetting Kevin. Kevin, tell Matt he's upset. And the second I go, Matt, you're upsetting me. Suddenly I go, oh my God, that just came right out of me.
Yeah.
And then
When
here's the
kids
last
talk.
thing I'll say about that. They love it. Like the young people who are in the exercise saying what the God Mike told them to say, when it's over, they look at me like I feel free and unbridled and released. I feel great about it. And then they would check in with each other. Like, did I say anything that hurt your feelings? They go, no, no. I knew exactly what was happening. And I also know that you're not saying that about me personally. I didn't take it personally. I mean, I did in the moment, but I don't think when we leave this room, I think that you hate me because in the moment you were mad at me.
Right. Yeah, it's like safe catharsis.
Oh my God.
And the
Yeah.
pressure is off of them initially. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. That's a very, very interesting way in.
Well, it
Very,
all started because I got very concerned that I was training actors who didn't want to develop their personal point of view.
yeah,
They wanted to hide, they wanted to go under the radar.
right, right.
But you can't be an artist and not have a voice.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yep.
I love all this. It's really amazing to have you on and reconnect with you. And before we close out, any final thoughts or words of wisdom?
Well, to have words of wisdom, you'd have to be wise. See that, and I'm not. So there's no, there's no wisdom coming out of this now. No, I honestly, I feel like it's not a bad idea. I'll go back to what I said before. I would encourage listeners to literally make a list for themselves. How I feel about, or things that frustrate me, things that hurt my feelings, things that fill me with joy, things that crack me up. And not just make me laugh, but that kind of fall on the ground. Like what's the thing that really tickled you? And by the way, Matt, you have to answer honestly because you could go like a baby, okay, maybe, but sometimes the answer to like I'm not going to get crude, but the answer to what cracks you up laughing, tears could be kind of scatological. It could be crude,
Yeah.
and but you can't apologize. You go, I'm sorry, but that makes me laugh. Like a 12-year-old boy. Good.
Yeah.
Good. Own it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
nobody's going to shame you. Nobody's going to, you know, send you to Siberia. Do people still get sent to Siberia? I don't know, but
I'll have to look it up.
So that's all. I would say be kind to yourself, give yourself a break and let yourself off the hook and try it. Be a little brave and try it. Try it with your friends
Right.
and
Yeah,
loved
name it.
ones.
Name it, name it.
Name it.
Take that first step to name those things. I think often just naming something and making it real can take you down a path of all that discovery too. It's just being brave enough to putting pen to paper. As you say, it's
Yeah.
a good piece of advice.
Yeah. What we always say about, you'll remember this, what we say about our actors. A lot of actors say, I walked right to the edge of that cliff. Why was it scary? And I'm like, our actors walk to the edge of the cliff and then they take one more step
Yeah,
and then they're free falling, and you go, well, it was scary to be on the edge of that cliff, but it's terrifying to be falling. But you believe that there's a net that will catch you. There's humanity. Humanity will catch you, assuming goodwill.
I love that. Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Matt.
Your words continue to challenge and inspire, just like they did when I was 19 and sitting in that black box theater. So, if there's one thing that I hope listeners take away from today, it's that your point of view and your voice, they both matter, and the world needs them authentically, and being brave.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. The world needs it. You know what? Be of service. That's another thing. Like when you're too scared to have your own voice, think of it as that it's actually a service. You're doing the world a service by speaking your truth, It's not about you.
Yeah. And as a result, it is for you. You're
Or it cycles back, doesn't it? Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much again, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. So good to see you.